We're serious about your goals, and the RP Diet app is here to help. It creates a diet for your specific needs, lets you choose your favorite foods, and tells you exactly how much of them to eat and when. Expert System AI guides you along to keep you on track to your goals. For less than $15 a month, you have one of the most powerful diet coaches in your pocket. Cutting-edge data science tailored to your exact goals. The future is here today.
All right, folks, welcome back to the weekly webinar. Dr. James, Dr. Mike, as always. And we are here to answer your nonsense questions. Just kidding. They're usually pretty good. So, Mike, you want to just get right to it?
Let's get to it.
Cool.
Of the RP Plus crew, Metal Paul says, "Hey, docs. Think my questions got missed somewhere copy and pasting, so asking again. Sorry if you already answered it somewhere and I missed it somehow. Is it normal that your maintenance intake drops a ton during a cut? I realize it will drop to reduce need, lower overall body weight, etc. However, my personal drop in maintenance intake, this cut is quite extreme to me. During my mass, my maintenance intake is around 3,600 calories, and I was eating 4,000. Okay. Now, in the 8th week of this cut, my maintenance has dropped to 3,000, making me eat 2,300. It's still rather easy, though. Following RP Diet Book 2.0 basically increased my veggies by a ton. So if you're in week 8 of your cut, I'm not exactly sure how you're estimating your maintenance calories. James,
that's what I was that's what was kind of dinging in my mind. Like, how are you so sure about those numbers if you're in the cut itself?
Yeah. Now, the short-term decrease is going to be huge. But so one thing I've done before is like many diets that I've run on myself before, I'll run a diet and the weight loss starts to sort of peter out a little bit, seemingly. I'll have like a week with no change. And I'll drop it even more, calories-wise, and then I'm losing pretty slowly. And I'll be like, oh my God, I'm dropping like crazy. And then I've had other diets where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to eat these macros that I know is a good enough macros to cut just on straight thermodynamics. I'm going to see what happens. And I make no adjustments, and I lose 1.5 pounds a week for 9 weeks straight. And I'm like, okay. So I think a lot of times when we cut a little bit too rapidly, we end up getting into such a fight or flight state that the cortisol, et cetera, just stores a ton of body water. And then the more we fight that, the more body water it stores. It makes it look like we're not losing weight really fast at all. So I think estimating maintenance can be really, really difficult in the middle of a cut. So I think your maintenance is actually quite a bit higher than you think, although it can fall a lot because metabolic adaptation, especially meat, is a hugely adaptive. So there's everything to say about that. I will just say for future reference, if you think you're stalling, give it a little. Actually, I'm coaching my friend Charlie right now of RP, and I just coached him through a 5-month fat loss phase, his first real fat loss phase of his mature career. And we had a 3-week period where he basically didn't lose any weight. And he's like, dude, and I'm like, wait it out. And then the next week he lost like 4 pounds. Yeah. And then it was like 2 pounds, 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds, 1.5 pounds. And we just never adjusted from there. He didn't adjust his macros. After the first 3 months, we had 2 months where I don't believe I adjusted his macros a single time. And he just kept going. So a lot of times body water fluctuations are way bigger and sometimes last for way longer than you would expect. You got to be easy on the trigger finger. The numbers are good. If anything, you're getting good hypertrophy training anyway, good momentum built. I would say waiting a little longer is better than cutting really quick. In addition to that, like the way we designed the RP Diet app, some of you may notice who have been using it, that the cuts are not very aggressive. They could have been much more aggressive, but they're not. And you think like, why not? Because I think when you're already cutting it, everything's working really well. You don't want to make these huge drastic cuts. And I've seen a lot of people, including myself, freak out in the middle of a diet. Like, I'm not losing weight fast enough, make massive cuts, and then everything just goes straight to hell. James?
Yeah, and the other thing too is sometimes you get like the short side gain, long-term cost where you cut really aggressively in the beginning and you lose a lot of weight, and that seems to be great. But then if you were to do a really long cut or a double pumped cut, like with the maintenance in between, next thing you know, like you get to your maintenance and you're still at poverty macros and you just can't lose weight anymore because you cut so aggressively in the beginning. So sometimes that strategy falls short, especially on the longer diets on the tail end where now you actually aren't losing any more weight and you're at poverty macros and everything sucks. So it's usually a good idea to wait it out, as Mike already said.
Yeah. And then Metal Paul says, this brings me to a second thing I was wondering. It's always mentioned to maybe supplement With a multivitamin during cut, as your micros might drop too low. My personal experience is the other way around. Ate so fucking much veggies during this cut that micros for sure is not an issue. Now, so remember, not all your micronutrients come from veggies. A lot of them come from fats. There's tons of fat-soluble vitamins, and those might actually very well be low because you definitely cut on your fats when you're dieting. And if you're not cutting on your fats, so fuck, you're cutting. So let's pause that for a second. Then he says, during a mass, however, I ate lots of veggies since they're so filling. It's not really a question, just an observation, I suppose. It's an interesting observation, but I would say, like, for me, it's actually a really simple question. There's a couple variables. One, do I get a high quality nutrition during a cut? Yeah, always. My quality of food is better, composition is better. On a mass, I eat much more dog shit. Literally, I eat physical dog shit when I'm at. But there's a hilarious sequence of pictures that I like. I think I tagged a couple people on Facebook. I didn't link it. It's like kids throwing a panic attack and crying, and there's the reason. Like, they wrote right under why, and one of them's like, "I wouldn't let him eat the cat's food." He's sitting next to the cat food, like, ah! I'm like, you don't want to eat that, kid. It'll doing you a favor. But in any case, the quality comes and goes, but the thing is about vitamins and minerals is that you never can be sure you're getting enough from food, and we all have these weird regimented diets and stuff, and a lot of times we don't follow our cravings, which is a lot of times how your body equalizes vitamin and mineral stuff is through cravings. What I do is I just have a multivitamin, multimineral tab from fucking Sam's Club or Walmart just once a day, every day in the morning, no matter what the time of the season is, and that makes sure I just don't drop to any absurd level. It was a piece of advice introduced to me by a professor in my undergraduate studies in kinesiology. And he actually cut the tab in half because he knew the vitamins were overdosed in a bunch of them. I'm much bigger than he is, so I just eat the whole thing. One tab, it's a gummy. I eat it every fucking day. It's just a really good insurance policy, so to speak. So I would just do that, James.
Mel is like addicted to vitamin gummies. We have to restrict her from eating more than the regular dose.
You could just have regular gummies without any fear of vitamin toxicity.
She feels like it's justified because of their vitamins, right? Yeah. She's like, "Oh, I can eat all these." She's kind of glaring at me from the side of
She never glares. That's so unlike her. All right. And he says, after this cut, I'll be doing a month maintenance and then an extended mass. Hell yeah. Based on your previous answers, I'll be altering my MPT 5-day to fit in an extra leg day, doing a heavy ham, medium day, and light day. Oh, sorry. No, there's no ham. Heavy day, medium day, light day. Cool.
You just got ham on the brain, son.
Yeah, I guess.
About that ham.
Ugh, gross.
Hot ham.
Hot ham and cheese. It's funny. Anytime they do the big picture of a spread or video of a big Christmas spread, there's always the Christmas ham. I'm like, who the fuck still eats ham? Take that thing off the fucking table. It's 2019.
You know what? I'd rather have the ham than the turkey, honestly. Get that turkey out of here. Nobody wants that fucking turkey.
You're out of your fucking mind, James.
Really? You like the turkey during the holidays? I like
the dark meat, man.
Yeah.
Big old turkey leg. I hate white meat turkey is awful. People who prefer white meat turkey, motherfucker, are you dieting or some shit? What's wrong with you? It's right. Tasteless fucking meat.
And at that point, I'd rather have turkey cold cuts.
For sure.
Right? I don't know what it is. I don't like that fucking turkey. Get that turkey out of here. Honey baked ham. I'll take that. Every now and again.
Honey baked. Now we're starting to put a few more chips on the table.
Oh, for sure.
All right. So heavy day, medium day, light day, no mention of ham. I got some extra questions on that. Number one, I got one totally off day in the program. When would it be best to have it? Right before my heavy leg day, right after my heavy leg day, or somewhere else? I would say right after lightest leg day so that you get really full healing before your heavy leg day. James, agreed?
If we're just looking at the legs alone, yeah, that's probably a really good idea. The other thing, too, with the off days is that sometimes it depends on how you want to set up your frequency. Like if you wanted to train chest 3 times per week, right? You might actually have to have your off day on a very specific day because your chest day might be 1 day apart, right? Whereas if you don't take it on that day, now you have back-to-back chest days, etc. So it's one of those things that you might also consider the frequency of some of the other things that you're doing. And that's kind of a conundrum I've run into with my training where when I've been playing around with the frequency, one of the things that has to now be where I used to auto-regulate my rest day and take it when I felt like I wanted it. Now I've actually had to be more strict about when I take the rest day because of the way I've altered my frequency. So just something to think about.
Interesting. On my number 2, on my light quad day, I'll be doing 2 different 20 to 30 rep exercises. One of those will be leg extensions. I'm still not sure what the second one will be. Any suggestions? Man, I would start
second
with
one.
one, bro.
Yeah. What are you gonna do?
Where are you
next?
going? Are you kidding me?
You do like leg extensions for like a metabolite protocol. I'd be done like at that point. There's nothing else happening for quads on that day.
Yeah. I mean, like if you really have some kind of funky MRV, which is super high, was high five to you. Walking lunges are great because they're not axially loading. They're very conducive for high reps. And after leg extensions, your quads are super limiting factor. You'll get fucked up super bad. That's a consideration, but I would just say either just one exercise is good enough on that day a lot of times. But if you really need to, I would say walking lunges.
Another good one might be like belt squats after the knee extension, because at that point your quads are toast and it's already like a very light loaded exercise. Now you do the leg extensions. Now it's even lighter. You're going to use like a 25 or a 45 pound weight and you'll be good.
If you ever permanently disfigure your back and can't ever squat again or leg press or hack squat, the combination of leg extensions and belt squats in some capacity will give you legs as big as you ever want, but it will come at a cost of fucking brutal pain.
I did high rep belt squats this morning. It was existential pain where you just like put it down and you're like, what is my life?
Why am I doing this?
Why am I here?
100%. Number 3, I will be focusing a bit more on legs, but the regular MPT has very little biceps and triceps work in it. Would it be okay to include more of those as well, or be overdoing it? You never can tell until you try it. Just be reasonable. Look at your program. Like, you've been training for a while now, Metal Paul, and you can look at a program and like, James, you ever look at a program that you write and you're like, what the fuck am I thinking? Or you're like, this is easy. Like, figure out which one of those it is, Metal Paul, and go in the moderate to easy side. And if you think really, then put a bit more biceps and triceps in. But for the love of God, take something out. Take a couple back sets out. Take a couple chest sets out, shoulders, something. Something's got to give. You look at the overall program, don't bite off more than you can chew. And if you start it and you have to notice after week 2 or 3, it's completely insane, you're going to have to deload and then make some cuts.
Yeah, dude, I have that moment every time I write a program for like females under like 130 pounds. I'm like, what? I'm killing this person. And they get the peak week summary back. They're like, it was great. I'm like, how are you still alive?
Yeah.
What happened?
Every single time. Number 4, to continue question 3, how best to alter the full body program to make it leg, chest, shoulder, and arm emphasis? Is it as simple as upping the volume on the emphasis muscle groups and lowering it on the non-emphasis? Are there other considerations? There are minor considerations of exercise order. So like the easy one there is like, so apparently you're backing off on your back, right? That's actually the only thing missing from there as far as I can tell. So if you're backing off on back training, put back training on, what you could do is reduce its frequency. Back, you could train only twice a week instead of 3 times, and train it as just 1 exercise per session. So that's a total of 5 to 10 sets of back per meso, and put it on maintenance volume and do it last on those days. So I would say like on your upper body days, do like a set of pull-ups at the end of the day, and another upper body day, do a set of bent rows or machine rows or cable rows at the end of the day. Or sorry, not a set, an exercise of bent rows and an exercise of pull-ups, and that's it. Right. Did I miss anything?
No, I was going to do the same like exercise order suggestion you did, but I like the addition you made about lowering the frequency too. That was also really good.
Yeah, because why push something 3 times a week is not even emphasis. I mean, James and I never know, I think, how far to push because literature is a little bit unclear. We never know how far to push how much can you de-emphasize. But I don't think either one of us, if you pressed us, Metal Paul, and said, can I do once a week frequency for back and still maintain, both of us would probably have to say like, yeah, probably. Yeah.
And the thing is too, like, even if it started to dip below your MV, what you would gain in resensitization once you started training back like twice a week at that point probably would be a wash over time. So you'd have like an extended time of kind of no progress. But
if you're using that time to push other muscles, it's really not lost time at all.
Right. Exactly. It's a trade-off.
Number 5, planning this extended mass phase. I'm around 8 to 10% body fat ending this cut. I remember Mike saying it would be a good idea to do a roughly 16-week mass, 4-week mini cut, and then a 12-week mass. Am I remembering that correctly?
Am I remembering that right?
Remembering that. Tell you what, is this a good block setup? I think it's great. James, any protestations?
No. So the only thing, so like I get a lot of these with my clients, like, what do you think of this tentative plan? And that's the one thing I like to just remind people is like, keep it tentative, right? Don't, because sometimes they'll make the plan and then they feel good about it. Something out of their control happens, right? And they get a little bit off and then they feel disappointed, like they fucked up or they did a bad job. When the reality is, it's like they did the best job that they could, but something came up, like maybe they had a work thing or a vacation or somebody died. Who knows? Just keep it tentative.
Fucked up, James. Jesus Christ.
I know it is, but it happens all the time. And then people will email you back like, oh, I feel like I let you down. It's like, dude, this whole thing was tentative. Don't feel bad. You know what I mean? It's like, whatever. Who cares?
100%.
There's other things in life.
Number 6, I got a bit of a nagging shoulder, but narrow grip bench press and parallel grip pressing seems working just fine. To rotate my exercise a bit, I was looking into reverse grip bench presses, obviously in a power rack. I know Greg Knuckles is into those. What's your take on them? I'm not a big fan of them, and I'm not a big fan of Mr. Knuckles either. You need to run and tell him I said that. You know what, man? James and I, our sort of universal view on exercises is we have our own personal biases, but you got to try it with light weights to see if you like the jam, and if you like it, and it doesn't hurt, if it doesn't hurt your joints, you get them a good mind-muscle connection, if it's getting you a pump and soreness and so on and so forth, we can't ever possibly on any ground say it's a bad idea. So hit it. Just don't capitate yourself, James.
Yeah, and that's just one exercise that I have tried over and over again and just never have found success in terms of like getting it in the correct position that doesn't cause
pain. My hands don't even
awkwardness.
Move like that, dude. Like,
yeah, and it just might be like maybe I'm a knucklehead or maybe I just didn't find the right groove in terms of the technique. For me, that's just like a 100% failure rate. So that one I have moved on from. But like Mike said, give it a try, play around with it, use light weights, change the grips around, change your technique, see if it works. And if it works, great. If not, oh well.
Hey, is Mel still back there?
Yeah, she is.
Can you tell her something real quick?
Sure.
Can you just say 100% failure rate?
Mel, Mike wants you to know 100% failure rate. She got a chuckle out of that.
Excellent. That's I'll tell you after the podcast is over.
Oh, I know.
Oh, you know. Okay, great.
I was trying to sneak it in subtly.
Jabba's pet parrot monkey. Dude, do you have Disney Plus? Have you been watching The Mandalorian?
No,
it's fucking incredible. James is fucking great. It's the old Star Wars type of shit. It's The Mandalorian single-handedly made up for whatever fucking disaster is coming with this new Star Wars movie, which I've heard via leaked reviews that it's awful.
Oh,
I know. Doesn't that suck? I hope they're wrong.
They keep
The Mandalorian
that, like
incredible.
that Palpatine's like coming back too. That's why they kind of
fucking,
like pulling me in. I'm like, oh, Palpatine, what?
Yeah, but also like it's so lame. Really, still Palpatine. This motherfucker didn't try to kill him. Is Star Wars about Palpatine? Because this motherfucker have been in every single one of them shits, man.
Yes, and that actor has been alive this whole fucking time.
That's insane.
That's what's amazing.
In 1977.
Oh my god.
Can you imagine like meeting that guy in a flight and being like, wow, great, yeah, it's so great that you're in Star Wars. Then you turn on like Star Wars in your seat, 1977, you look at it, you're like,
motherfucker, you Palpatine. Hey.
You were old back then? He's like, yep. Like, did you stop? Are you really Palpatine? Because you don't age.
I'd be like, so what's it like working with Sam Jackson? Like, that's the best question 100%. You had for me.
That's the only relevant question as far as I'm concerned. All right. So thanks for your answers, Paul. Thank you for your questions. And Aiden says, hi, Mike and James. I have a weird question today. Try us. One of my close friends is currently in a university over here in the UK, and he's studying nutrition combined with something else, completely forgot. Okay. We regularly chat about what he learns, and one of the things he came to me is that calcium blunts muscle growth. This seems to me like some nonsense, as most whey proteins have calcium in it, not to mention dairy. He may have heard this wrong, but he is adamant this is the case. Could you possibly dive into this? Outline why this may or may not be the case. Well, I'll tell you, the biggest argument against calcium blunting muscle growth is the following. Calcium inundates the entire sarcoplasm when the sarcoplasmic reticulum releases it into the muscle cell. So if calcium blunts muscle growth, we are real deep shit because that shit comes out every time you contract. I'm aware of no evidence that supplemental calcium blunts muscle growth or anything. James, what's going on here?
I think he might be getting confused because I think calcium can block either zinc or magnesium uptake. One of those.
Yes, they actually, I think a couple of those block the other couple. Yeah.
Which is like such a minute thing. like the reason why that came up, I remember like in the early 2000s was because people were using ZMA
Yes, and it
casein
blocks
protein.
itself. Mm-hmm.
So it was like one of those kind of
I had a
problems.
supplement called CalMag Zinc. It was all the same, and then I read that they'll block each other. I'm like, God damn it, stupid assholes ripped me off this fucking supplement.
Yeah, but I don't know of anything specific other than that. I can't think of anything where calcium is like directly
Huge
inhibiting
surprise.
muscle.
Ask him to expand on it, and I guarantee you he won't be able to.
He might just be confusing two different. Like that's kind of why I brought that up. He might be confusing some different pathways.
You got to get him. You got to be like, you're confused. You're confused. Sit down. Have a seat. Shut the fuck up.
Spam. Bah, bah.
That's it. Just punch him in the face. All right. And then he continues. Hi, guys. Thanks for answering my question last week on soreness and session MAV. Relating back to that, I forgot to mention that after the unsustainable higher frequency meso, I did 4 weeks at maintenance, volumes, 2x a week frequency before entering mass phase. I remember you saying last week that you could be doing all this volume and getting dick out of it. So how does someone know when they're resensitized to volume? Pumps from low set numbers, soreness, etc. Just wondering, as you said, that even moderate frequencies and volumes should be more challenging, even though I am pushing quite high volumes after resensitization phase, or maybe overthinking this. I don't think you're overthinking this. You know you're ready. It's hard to know you're ready, so usually do 3 or 4 weeks or whatever, and then take a nice active rest or whatever, or deload. And when you come back to normal training, when you try normal training, what you should notice is that you do get pumps from very few set numbers, sometimes pumps from much lower reps than you're used to. And you get way more sore from lower volumes than you think. And even beyond pumps and soreness, a perception of acute damage. You know how like you'll do 2 sets of squats and normally, like, well, whatever, here we go. You do 2 sets of squats coming back and you're like, oh my God, like my quads, there's something messed up in those quads. Something's not right. So that kind of situation is typical of being resensitized. And a lot of times the pumps are bigger and last longer too. So, James?
Yeah, so you can kind of take the Ghetto MEV estimator, and basically what you would see is all of those indices kind of shift down really low, where you're like, whoa, normally my MEV would be like 5 sets per session, and I already hit my marks at like 2, right? Boom. That's kind of how you know. That's the idea. So take those same Ghetto MEV markers and you'd see them shift down. And then you could also use some of like the psychological ones you'd see from like deloading too. Like if you really have a high desire to train, like your perception of fatigue is like really, really low. You know, if you feel like a high state of physical preparedness, like you feel like you could jump over a building, all those kind of things also would play into that.
Yeah, one of the ones that seems to come back for me is like I'll look at a piece of exercise equipment, and if I'm pretty overreached, like I'll be traveling with friends or watching friends lift, and I look at like I look at a pull down machine, and I'm like, ugh. And then when I'm really ready to train, I look at a pull down machine or I watch someone do pull downs. I'm like, ooh, they're getting such tasty pumps. Like I want to fucking pump. I want to pump. Like that's when you know you're pretty good to go. All right, second question from him here in this thread. I currently get really good pumps from set 2/4 onwards on all exercises with really good mind-muscle connection, which feels like it's ripping muscle off the bone, especially in the 5 to 10 rep range. But as stated last week, the only thing lacking is soreness, even though sessions are in the 6 to 12 set range. Form is also not a concern, getting as I'm a weirdo in that sense, as I wouldn't want to look like a fool in the gym doing anything wrong, so wondering if that's the case of me needing more volume than most to grow. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. You could be not getting sore for like 50,000 other reasons, including the volume landmark stuff. So if generally speaking, you're getting really good pump from 2 to 4 sets of stuff and on, I mean, fuck, I'm not really so worried about your gains, to be honest.
Yeah, and this might be like one of those things where like week 1, you notice you start really, really low, and then weeks 2 and 3, you're kind of like, oh, I'm not really getting any sore, but I'm still getting good pumps and stuff. Then you would just be kind of an indicator, like a gentle tap on the butt, like good game, keep going,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
add some volume until you find like it's starting to become either you're getting sore or you're really getting crippled by fatigue, and then you know, okay, time to back off.
Yeah. And he says, also, I seem to be doing, as you say, cramming as much volume into a micro as possible whilst performance is stable, maintaining rep/weight with IRR dropping each week. From that, I then keep adding sets until I reach my MRV. I then plan to deload and start the next meso with slightly increased volumes from meso 1, week 1, slightly higher intensities, and also hitting upper body movements 4 times a week instead of 3 due to reaching 25 sets at my chest. To split it up better, does that all seem logical? Seems good to me.
Yeah, man.
Would it also be fair to say that if I were to hit the same reps with increased weight at the start of the new meso, that muscle has been built? I don't know about muscle has been built. Fitness has certainly been gained, and if you're training in such a way that causes mostly hypertrophy and not any other kind of fitness gains, which you seem to be, then some portion of that fitness gain, maybe even a large one, will be muscle gain.
Yeah, you could there's always the case you could say there's neurological changes, like your efficiency in the movement just goes up the more you do it over time. But it's, I would say, a pretty good guess of maybe 50-50, you're making some more efficiency changes over time and you're probably gaining some muscle too.
Yeah, 100%. And then last question from Aiden is, are there any other proxies that someone can use to determine whether their hypertrophy plan is working and that they're getting the most out of it without them spinning their wheels? Meso to meso to meso rep strength increases are a real good way to go about things. That's probably the best one, short of knowing that you look bigger.
Yeah, and I think that's the other one where it's the subjective and even some of the objective body comp measures. If you have progress pictures, you have body weights, and even if you do some arm, leg circumference type stuff, those are things that can help bolster okay, I've been gaining weight and my arms are a lot bigger and it doesn't look to be all fat, right? A little bit subjective, a little bit objective, but still probably pretty useful.
Agreed. James Mendenhall asks, would there be any benefit in slowing down the progression from MEV to MRV? For example, if I train chest Monday with flat bench, Wednesday with incline bench, and Friday with dips 3 sets, each on week 1, then on week 2 I do 4 sets, only on Mondays workout and keep Wednesday and Friday's workout the same. Week 3, adding another set, and so on until after 6 weeks and getting to 5 sets each day for a total of 15 sets, assuming MEV is 9 hard sets and MRV is 15 for simplicity. Edit, you touched on this some in a recent webinar. What's the downside of hanging more around the middle of volume and maybe progressing the sets per week 10, 12, 14 and staying away from the easiest training and most fatiguing? The volume jumps from 9 to 15 sets in just 3 weeks seems more aggressive if I do that for multiple body parts simultaneously. For example, I'm increasing volume and weight each week on bench press. I also need to do that for tricep isolation work that I would do after bench, or would maintaining a moderately challenging tricep workout after more pressing work be enough progressive overload for the tris? So I think you make a very, very, very good point here that if you can repeat your weights on triceps and reps and sets after last week's workout of chest was sort of hard, this workout for this week for chest was very hard or much harder, but you still hit the same tricep numbers, that usually indicates that you actually progressed. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually stimulate your triceps much more because it mostly just reflects that you're handling the fatigue better for your chest. It's a revelation of fitness rather than a gain in fitness. So we would still tell you to push the triceps further. Fundamentally, all of this wiggle room stuff, and I've actually I've been looking at the hypertrophy book at it a bit more, and James just went through it. We really are starting to move in a direction where we like to really get this all to fall to auto-regulation. The question of progression through a mesocycle should be answered every single session and every single week based on how you're feeling and how you're objectively performing. So if last week you got great pumps and you got plenty sore, this week, do you go up by 1 set or 2 sets? Is really up to you. And if you want to go up by 1 set, that's totally cool. And if you want to go up by 2, that's probably totally fine. What we don't want people to do is the extremes, where last week's workout was just really not that stimulative, and you're like, I want to milk it out more, and you don't progress this week. So what's this week's workout going to be? Also not that great. There's definitely no rush to progress super fast. But if you stay just ahead of the curve on, okay, am I recovered from soreness? Am I getting sore at all? Am I getting good pumps? And am I recovering on time, and is my performance good? If all those things are in the clear, you can choose to move up by 1 or 2 sets per session. Moving up by 3 or whatever would be fucking crazy. Don't do that. 1 or 2 is your choice. Just make sure that if you move up by 1 and 1 and 1 in 3 weeks, and then no longer getting good pumps because you haven't moved up by enough, or there's no soreness, no pumps, and your performance is still good, you have to ask yourself the question of, am I really doing enough volume to maximize my gains? And the answer is there's probably not. And so maybe you go up by 2 sets, right? So let the auto-regulation decide. You do have some wiggle room. Just make sure the wiggles don't take you to where you're intentionally not going as hard as you should be to, for some reason, last longer. It's almost like, this is a brutally stupid analogy, but unfortunately it works on a logical basis, on an analogical basis. If you're having sex with your partner or whatever,
oh boy,
and you're like, I know, it's terrible. Don't let Nick Shaw see these. If you haven't, I think it's a good analogy though, James. I think you might appreciate this. If you haven't sex with your partner and you're like, man, you know what would be sweet is a lot of sex. So like, because you want to go an hour, like you are almost going to come and he or she is almost going to come like 3 times, but you back off, right? And it's amazing sex and you just fucking want to finish, but you're like, when I go an hour, at some point you have to ask yourself the question of like, is the hour really that good versus missing out on awesome fucking complete start to finish amazing sex? At some point the answer might be like, you're just having a lot of shitty sex. So like you can look over your 8-week plan and be like, I did 8 weeks. And someone's like, 8 weeks of what? And you're like, I don't know, mostly spinning my wheels, I guess, but I did it. It's like, why don't you have good training? There's no rush. Good training, and when the training auto-regulates itself to come to an end, it comes to an end. James?
Yeah, that was a silly example, but the point well taken. So I'm just kind of reading back through his question here, and maybe I can just share it real quick. So I'm looking at this, and maybe I'm just reading too much into it. So he's saying like, okay, MEV is like 9, MRV is 15, and the progression sample he gives here is like 10, 12, 14. So to me, that's kind of like what we would call like MAV training. But here's the deal, right? You put the 9 in front of the 10 and the 15 after the 14. So you get 9, 10, 12, 14, 15. That's a 5-week accumulation phase going from MEV to MRV. And guess what? As you're saying, kind of in the question, the bulk of your training is right here at what we would kind of call MAV with like a very modest progression all the way spanning that gap. So that's generally what we would recommend. Now, what Mike is saying is like, we're kind of getting away from saying like you should do it so rigidly where it's like definitely 1 set or definitely 2 sets. Like there's definitely a good, there's merit in having a plan and saying this is generally how I expect things to go. And I'm going to maybe follow that more often than not, or when I'm in doubt. But I think the auto-regulation is probably a better idea. So like what you wrote down to me, that's like basically saying the same thing that we say if you just put the MEV and the MRV on the top and bottom end. And that's what like a normal mesocycle should look like for the most part.
100%. All right. Ansh. Radhakrishnan.
He's got a beefy name, and I'm always meticulous about trying to spell things right, and I just got tired of it.
You fucking asshole.
I know. Turn him off. But he signs it as Ansh, so I didn't.
He goes by Ansh, yeah.
So,
all right. Hey, Docs, hope you're both doing well. Just wanted to run my plan for training frequency over my cutting block that's going to start after the new year. 3 mesos, a planned 12 weeks of dieting. I guess these are 3-to-1 mesos. Okay. With the goal of losing, or maybe 4-to-1s, with the goal of losing 10% body weight. For context, plan for frequency is basically to have average frequency of each muscle group match the frequency I just trained everything at for my recently completed mass block, which was 3 times a week frequency for every muscle group except biceps, which got hit 4 times a week. It seemed to work really well for me, and I've been running frequencies of 3 times a week for most of my muscle groups for a large portion of my training career so far. So I know that this frequency is quite sustainable. My plan for the cut is to start the first meso with everything trained at 2 a week, biceps 3, then going to everything trained 3 a week, biceps 4, and then concluding everything 4 a week, biceps 5. I know that the last meso is going to be quite challenging for some of my muscle groups, hamstrings, chest, triceps, honestly barely recover on time from 3x a week, though they do recover, but I imagine that my delts and biceps are going to appreciate the higher frequencies, and I can update my frequencies prior, based on how this goes. Of course, if for some reason I start shitting the bed during the second meso, I'll not push the frequency up for the third meso, but I think this plan is quite conservative, since I'll be starting things off easier than I normally do and only be pushing up for last meso. Let me know if that all makes sense. I mean, it makes as much sense as anything I've ever seen, man. I think it looks just fine, and with the caveat they said about auto-regulating if needed, I literally just don't have anything to add, James.
Yeah, I would, and the other thing too is like, maybe I would just say like, don't push frequency for its own sake necessarily. Like if you're like, dude, like 3 times for my chest is like, I'm already kind of at the threshold. You don't have a huge incentive to go to 4 times if it's like, if you're already on the breaking point. And if you go to 4 times and you're like, this fucking sucks, I'm never recovered at any point at any time, just go back to 3. Totally fine.
Yeah, I totally agree. I actually tried it. I did an experiment. I didn't really ever talk about this. I experimented for a very short time with 4-time-a-week frequency, and I just broke.
Yeah.
I just couldn't. My exercise selection for quads was really the thing. Like training quads, I train quads twice a week now. I stopped even doing 3 times a week. It was 3-time-a-week quad training. I had to train them when they were sore. Otherwise, my quad workouts would just kind of look pathetic. And 4 times a week, I would literally just come in and do like 2 or 3 sets of quads. And I basically would have very little pump, very little mind muscle connection. It was kind of like an extended warm up, and I was like, this is fucking stupid. Fuck that. Like, I'm not warming up to leg press so I can leg press 2 fucking sets or 3 sets. That's fucking ridiculous. Like, if I'm gonna warm up for leg press, it's gonna be 3 to 5 sets, and then by then, if I do that 3 times a week, I can only do it 3 times a week, not 4. So.
And the question is like, are you really leaving anything on the table at that point? It's hard to say. We don't really know.
Almost certainly not is really the answer. Yeah. And then Anj had another question. He said, just wanted to add on with a question about grip work. My brother, training mostly for powerlifting, is in a strength phase and running into grip issues on deadlifts. Ooh. What would be your general suggestions for training grip? Is it worth it for him to start training it right now while in a strength phase? Or is it better to hold off until he starts hypertrophy training again? I also imagine that training grip is a little bit different than training for maximum forearm hypertrophy. So would you guys suggest slightly different exercises for this purpose? Well, so I'll say a couple of things and we'll see where I miss stuff out. Forearm hypertrophy is a big part of grip training. So I think you have to have a base of forearm hypertrophy when you're training strength for grip. So grip, a lot of times people say, I need grip strength. And they just train only peaking strength. And I just don't think that's a good idea. So I think that you need to train grip strength by doing forearm hypertrophy. Once you've gotten through some forearm hypertrophy work, which we'll be releasing a muscle guide earlier next year about forearm hypertrophy training, once you've gotten bigger forearms, they're automatically going to be stronger already, especially if you fatigue manage properly. But what you can do is absolutely do some forearm strength training. And there you want to do challenging loads that roughly approximate the time that you hold a deadlift bar in a competitive pull, which is tends to be 3 seconds really, maybe even 4. And I would go a little bit over that. So I would do 5-second various isometric holds. You can do them with dumbbells. They're better with a barbell. The easiest way to do it without doing a ton of systemic fatiguing is to do holds on a weighted pull-up bar. So weighted holds on a pull-up bar. So put plenty of weight on a belt and have a pull-up bar within reach. Grab it, pull your knees up, and hold. That gives you essentially the same gripping and holding ability. And by the way, get yourself into deadlift grip position and do it. The cool thing is it doesn't actually load your spine. It's a nice stretch, and it comes very little fatigue. More sport specific later is doing static grip holds from a very, very I would say not even, a rack deadlift, but it's an 8th deadlift or something.
Yeah.
Pick up your weight, hold it. And I would say 5-6 seconds in that case, because there's some dynamic stuff that's missed. And another thing that I would encourage is down sets in deadlift and peak competition pulls to be held just a little longer, either at the top of every rep and especially at the top of the last rep. So you pull the last rep and just hold it for 3 good seconds. Like Konstantin Konstantinov used to do that all the time. If you get real comfortable holding a deadlift bar and you do all those other things for grip, that's a really good thing. The last thing I have to say is Captains of Crush grippers are really, really good. They help me significantly with my grip because they have a dynamic thing. And I would just get a series of them, start out with the easy, it's like a pre-trainer version, and then the trainer, then the Captains of Crush 1. And if you can close the 1, you can deadlift a whole lot, no problem. I've closed the 2.5, and my grip eventually got good for damn near anything I wanted to pick up. So the Captains of Crush is a good way to measure your grip strength and via repetitions to actually improve it. So.
Yeah, that was really solid. And so kind of the take home here is you can do a phase potentiated model for grip, even though we don't really think of grip that way, where you spend a lot of time building up the forearm flexor or the finger flexor muscles, and then eventually you transition over into actually doing direct grip work. And I was going to recommend using the grippers as well, because you can do grip and hold, and you could do a grip sets, basically do 5 where you grip, hold for 3 seconds, release, catch your breath, grip, hold, do a set of 5 of those and repeat, as you see fit. But basically what you would see is that phase potentiated model where in your hypertrophy phase, you're focusing on building up the forearms. And then when you get to your strength phases, you switch over to grip specific, grip strengthening exercises. Now, the one thing that you should be aware of when you actually train for grip is that it can actually interfere with some of your training stuff significantly, especially if grip is already becoming a limiting thing, because the forearms are one of those muscle groups just collectively where it takes a lot to really fuck them up. But once you fuck them up, it takes a while for them to bounce back. It's just one of those, you use them all the time. You really have to put in a lot of work. So once you actually get them into a fatigued, overload state, you better believe you're not going to be able to bench or deadlift that next day. So it's one of those where, like, we do recommend doing it, but you have to be very strategic in where you put it throughout the week so that it doesn't interfere with your other training. Or if you have competitions, even worse, right? So just be strategic in how you set up that face potentiated model and then how you interlace them throughout the week with your other powerlifts and stuff.
Yeah, specifically training grip right after you train deadlifts is a good thing.
Definitely.
Not before, not the day before. And also taper real well for grip training. So I would say in the last 2 or 3 weeks of your peak, for sure, do zero grip training whatsoever. Just do your normal pulling, and it's going to really, really defatigue your grip, and you're going to have really, really good approach after that. And also, just lastly, I would have your brother YouTube some grip technique videos. The way some people grip deadlift bar makes a big deal of sense. What I used to do is just grab it normally and just grab it like I grab any other bar. And that turned out not to be a great thing. I used to use deadlifts all the time with grip. And then I actually got grip advice from a gentleman at my gym. He was a very nice guy. He was a 700-pound deadlifter at 220. And he had the longest hands I've ever seen. And he goes, just make hooks with your hands like this. I tried it, and I couldn't pull 225. I was like, fucking ridiculous, dumbass advice. But he had these long-ass fingers. It didn't matter. Then my friend Travis from North Carolina was a pro strongman. He was 6'5", like 320, but he had hands that were basically the size of mine. And he had pulled like 800. And I was like, holy fuck. And he's like, Mike, listen, everyone else is ridiculous. You put the ball right under these calluses right here, and you sink the calluses in and go over. And as soon as I tried that, I was like, oh my God, world of difference. So depending on hand position and design, your brother might benefit from just watching some YouTube videos on hand position and deadlift grip from a couple of sources, trying a couple things and seeing what works best. That can actually put pounds and pounds on your grip right away.
Yeah, for sure. I had a similar thing where not quite on the same spot, but right in the joint of the fingers. I would like get the bar right in there, and it would just like the knurling would just catch. There was just so much friction, right? You just couldn't move. Same idea.
That's when either your skin comes off or you get the lift.
Yep.
I work hard for my results, and I need my diet dialed in. The RP Diet app tells me what to eat to keep me on track. It offers suggestions for changes based on my responses, giving me the freedom to choose my path. A personal digital diet coach for less than $15 a month? Yeah, that works.
All right, Sean Shansom. That's a pretty sweet name. Mm-hmm. Hey, doctors, we met briefly at the RP Summit where I blathered nonsensically at you for 20 to 30 seconds before taking a picture with both of you.
Right on.
I was the guy in the green robot shirt. I have official government paperwork to certify us. I'm not an incel, I promise.
That's easy to forge.
Easy to forge. And incels make a lot of promises, too. I've really enjoyed your webinars and decided to join RP Plus in order to buy your friendship while it's on sale. That's exactly what you're getting.
It's like a fraternity.
Yeah. 100%. Exactly like a fraternity. Except we do less giving each other blowjobs or whatever the fuck it is they do in frats.
Yeah, gross.
It's fine. It's a fine way to live. I've been training pretty seriously for a number of years. I will likely have a number of specific programming questions for you down the road. I also claim that I have read your books before I do, so my guarantee to you. All right.
Nice.
A little lifting history as it may shed some light on the questions at hand. Year 4 to 0 CrossFit. Other personal training not terribly well structured. Year 0 to 1 year, I ran the starting strength linear progression poorly for about 1 year, 9 months or so. To recap, that's 3-day full body-ish, very limited exercise selection. Year 1 to 3 for 2 years, 4-day a week full body training with predominantly strength focus. Broadly speaking, frequent singles, practice and competitive power lifts, 2/3 of training in 3 to 6 rep range, 1/3 of training in the 8 to 12. Vast majority of movements with a barbell, except for accessories. For biceps, triceps, and additional back development, year 4 to date, 8 months. Slowly transitioned from the 4-day full body training I had been doing to incorporate more RP-style programming for body composition. Now training 6 days a week with 4 longer days, 2 shorter days, a lot more dumbbell variations, more machines, accessories, and more bodybuilding-friendly variations of compound lifts, e.g. more stiff-legged deadlifts versus just more deadlifts. All right, the actual question. I've discovered that I have about 10 to 12% strength discrepancy between legs as demonstrated on the single leg press.
That's actually significant. Yeah.
Tested with a set of 10 at 2 RAR. There's also visual discrepancy in quad size that appears to correlate to discrepancy. Perhaps interesting to note, I had not previously observed any discrepancy on single leg knee extensions or single leg curls. I have also not considerably noticed a difference in other unilateral squatting variations like weighted lunges, step-ups, etc., but I think poor skill and balance have likely clouded those results. I'm terribly unathletic. Who joined the club.
Yeah.
So now that I've found this discrepancy, how should I train it? I've actually been allowing myself to train the stronger leg with more weight in the single leg press, such that I'm matching reps at the expected RIR. My thought is that if I train the strong leg for reps weight equal to the weak leg, strong leg just doesn't get an effective stimulus. It's very good reasoning. It's absolutely correct. The goal should be to shrink the gap in strength and hopefully size by consequence, but doing so but not effectively training the strong leg seems dumb to me. What do I do? Now, so hold on a second. Time for some logic. Very good question. I love these kinds of questions. Sean, here's the deal. You say you want your weak leg to catch up, but then you say, but doing so by not effectively training the strong leg seems dumb. So let me ask you a question. If James Hoffman walks faster than me, and I'm trying to catch up, what's the best way for me to catch up? If I walk faster, if he slows down, or both? Of course, both. If James continues to walk at his regular speed and I walk as fast as I can, then I'll probably catch up to him, but it might take a long time. And there's another problem. If you're optimizing hypertrophy for both legs, for the strong leg, and you're putting a superlative level of hypertrophy onto the weak leg, you're exceeding your weak leg's MRV, very likely, because you are doing your possible best for the strong leg, and then you want on top of that for the weak leg. That's just not how it works. I have a video, the Stubborn Body Parts Training Guide, which can be applied. It's on YouTube, and I have another one. I think I did a webinar, and I think there's an RP Plus video of like catching up weak body parts, unilateral training and such. The key is to put your shit that you want to catch up to at MV, at most at MEV, and then cycle MEV to MRV training for the other thing. The reason, which means if you really want to catch up your strong leg, your weak leg to your strong leg, I would do much less bilateral work, a lot less unilateral work, all of it on the weak leg, none of it on the strong leg, so that the vast majority of your lower body or quad training is for that one quad, and the other quad just gets maintenance. Because if you just simply add, you could be adding over your MRV, which is a huge reason why a bunch of people, the straight logic of, well, I'm going to do normal curls to balance out my arms, but then I'm going to do extra one-arm curls for this one. Like, gee, why don't you just do extra for everything? And you'll be super huge. Well, that's not how it works. So I would definitely say put that one quad on MV after this other quad catches up, and actually I would say exceeds a little bit. I would say exceeds because you're going to get a resensitization from that one quad once you start training it. Then go back to training both quads relatively normally and still train this one a little bit more and this one a little bit less. After several months, you'll be roughly the same. You can go back to normal training and see if the deficit opens up again. Based on a couple of things, the deficit may continue to reopen and reopen and reopen. For example, you may have a different number of muscle fibers in your strong versus weak leg. That happens. You may have a different degree of innervation. That happens. You may have a different joint design where every time you walk, it causes more fatigue to the weak quad or less fatigue to the strong quad, so on and so forth. So it's definitely a possibility that this you're not ever permanently fixing this imbalance, but you can temporarily fix it by doing what we just said, just reevaluate every now and again. James?
Yes, I'm kind of going back and forth on my position on this one because usually like anywhere between like kind of 0 to 8% is like a non-clinical, very just normal discrepancy for people. Usually around like 10, we start to see like more of a clinical discrepancy. And the reason why we call it that is because now it's actually going to start causing changes, like unfavorable changes in things like your technique and the way that you actually move or the way that you lean on one side at rest versus leaning on both feet. Stuff
I know
like
exactly
that.
where you're going with this. I love it.
Okay, so my on the one hand, you've identified like, yeah, that definitely would be kind of a problem, but my curiosity is getting the better of me where I'm saying, have you noticed anything in your bilateral movements that would lead you to believe that this discrepancy is actually giving you a problem?
Also, only one unilateral movement is detecting the change, and none of the others. Almost for sure, as sport coaches, we'd have to say a distinct problem underlying in physiology and anatomy is one that presents itself through a variety of contexts.
Yes.
It's a single context problem. We can't say it's a fundamental problem.
Yeah. So, I mean, on the one hand, like I'm not against you just wanting to be a little bit more symmetrical, but if it's never like significantly inhibited your ability to squat and deadlift, which you've already been doing for years at this point, like if no one's ever looked at you like, hey, you look like a fucking pigeon or a duck, like when you're squatting on one side, like you look goofy, right? Like, why do you do that?
Nice peg leg.
Right. Like if that's never come up and you don't have like hip pain or back pain on one side as a result of being like cockeyed or anything like that, honestly, it might just be like a wonky movement for you, and especially if it's not manifesting itself in other areas, like Mike already said. So on the one hand, like that's definitely a discrepancy that's maybe worth exploring. But on the other hand, if it's not causing any problems and you're not seeing any like kinetic chain related problems where you're getting problems in like your hip or your ankle or your back as a result of this huge discrepancy, I don't know. I don't even know if it's worth addressing at that point. You might be able to just keep doing what you're doing.
He did say it was visually apparent to him. So if it's visually apparent, you can totally do what we said if it bothers you. But if it doesn't, then I would just say normal training.
Yeah, like if you're training for aesthetic, like if you just want to like look good naked, like then definitely, right? Because then you have one big buff leg and one less buff leg, and that just looks silly, right? So all for that. But like if you're actually perseverating on this and you're going to make major changes to your training solely for the purposes of the strength discrepancy, and it's not causing you any other problems, especially in other exercises, I'd say, meh, leave it.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Isaac Nahmias says, hey, James, hey, Mike. Number one, I recently started a new lecture series. That's the new one I'm putting up about advanced hypertrophy concept and tools, but I don't understand all the terms used in the video, motor units, myonuclei, etc. What can I read to understand those better? Any physiology book will do, any exercise physiology book will do, but the best one is Brad Schoenfeld's hypertrophy textbook. Type that into Google and you will get a textbook that if you read, you will learn so much more than those videos can teach you, and then you'll make maximum utilization of all those videos. James, do you have any better advice?
No, that's a great advice. And all I was going to say is like, these are just fancy science words. Like if I were to tell you that myonuclei just means the nucleus, like the nuclear material in a muscle cell, you'd be like, oh, duh. That, like, right. You just never heard it before, read it before, right? So most of this stuff is just like the more appropriate scientific terms we use for things that you probably already understand.
Motor units is, that requires an understanding of what that actually is to make much sense out of it. I would say like that the thing about advanced hypertrophy concept and tools is it's called advanced for a reason, right?
Right.
So it's for folks that are pretty advanced and know their stuff. If you find that you're not hanging with the terms, shit, man, you could do one better. Fuck, what am I even saying? Yes, buy Brad's book, but also go back and watch the earlier lectures in RP Plus.
Oh yeah,
there's entire
a whole bunch of
lectures there, like basic exercise physiology. Go and find Jason's basic exercise phys. Go through all those lectures. He'll teach you all those terms, and you'll be good to go.
Solid.
Number 2, in the mesocycle I'm currently in, I'm doing dumbbell presses for chest, but feel like my triceps burn out before my pecs. Could that be an indication that I should change the movement for another one for the specific rep range? Maybe. I would also say that maybe your chest is much weaker than your triceps and or much more slow twitch, and your triceps are much more fast twitch, so they burn out faster. I could experiment with a different movement, but you might consider pre-exhausting, so doing some dumbbell or cable or machine flies first and then doing the presses after.
Another thing too on the dumbbell press, and this is going to sound like, oh, duh, but I tell you, this happens all the time. You watch people dumbbell press and they do this kind of shit,
yeah,
right? Where they're like really tucked in like this. What you really want to focus on with the dumbbell press, you can hold your arms roughly at 90 degrees, but really what you want to get is your elbows to come out and your arms to come out to really spread out and get that chest activation. So a lot of people will really try and keep their wrists in tight like this, like inside of the width of their elbows, which is going to basically kind of mimic that close grip pressing type movement, which is going to put more emphasis on your triceps. So what I would say is think about like Hulkamania, right? Like ripping the shirt off, like, yeah, brother, like spread out those chests and push up straight. And don't worry so much about like coming in and like really locking out the arm super hard. Think about coming out really wide, stretching out the chest, and just push straight up and see if that takes that problem away. Might be a little alteration in your technique.
Great advice. I just had a thought of like, we say like people who say brother in real life are fucking lame. Can you imagine saying that to someone turning around and Hulk Hogan standing behind you? You're like, what I meant to say was, I'm an idiot. Please don't eat me.
But not you, brother.
You're great. Number 3, when working in high rep ranges, 15 plus reps, it seems like you get a crazy burn, which I suppose is totally normal. But let's say I'm training biceps for the sake of the discussion and my target RIR is 2. Should I continue the set until I am at true to RIR, even if that means resting up to 2 to 3 seconds between reps to let the lactic acid dissipate? Or should I stop 2 reps away from that burn, which makes me feel like I can't move my arms, even though if I wait a tiny bit, I can? I hope I was clear. So the answer is either. You just have to make sure you're consistent in which one you do week to week to week, which each exercise. So you say, okay, this time with bicep curls for this mesocycle, no rest pause. RIR to me means as soon as I can't do 2, I stop, I rack. Or you can pick another exercise, even in the same mesocycle. Okay, with dumbbell curls, I'm going to give myself a chance to stop twice during the set and take 2 little breathers. But don't extend the number of breathers, okay, and don't change the number of breathers from 0 to 1 to infinity, because then it makes tracking impossible. So be clear with yourself on how many of those rests you're allowing yourself to take, and then take as many as you allow. And if it's allowed 0, it's really, we get into nuances of what that means. So the more of those little breathers you take, then the more likely it is that you have to do fewer sets to get the same effect. The fewer breathers, the more sets you have to take. So it all ends up in the wash. You still end up doing just about the same number of reps. So there's some, these kinds of sets are more stimulative, but they're also more fatiguing. I really can't right now say that there's a definitely clear evidence that rest pauses work better or worse than straight sets taken pretty close to failure. Whatever the answer is, I think that just being consistent is going to be the huge determining factor there.
And the reason why that's noteworthy is because most people, when they do like 3 to 4 RIR, they just do the straight set and they don't think about breathers, right? It's when you get to 1 to 2 RIR that you actually start thinking about doing breathers. And that's when it becomes an inconsistent thing across weeks. And I know that sounds like dumb, like, of course, just do it the same way. But you're going to do like weeks 1 and 2, like, oh, okay, I'm doing bicep curls. And then you're going to get to weeks 3 and 4, and you're going to be like, oh, if I do a breather, I could get a few more reps and it will look like I'm making progress. But the reality is it progress? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you just changed the way that you did the set. So that's the idea there.
Yeah, 100%. Number 4, if the answer is that I should wait a few seconds to continue my set properly, how many seconds do you think is acceptable to wait for? So I would think that it depends on the exercise. I would also roughly standardize it. So what I like to do is standardize breaths. Forget about seconds and do breaths. On leg press, I give myself a maximum of 3 breaths. So I press, push the weight up. I don't rack it. I just extend completely on my knees and I go. And if I'm ready to go after the second one, I go. Sometimes I need 3. If I need 4 breaths, I rack it because the set is fucking over. So I think 2 to 3 breaths is totally fine. After that, I think it just engaged in fuckery.
Yeah, totally agreed.
All right.
I have like a sneeze, like it's about to come out.
Oh, I hate it. Magnus says, hello. Would adding some sets of shrugs or rope face pulls on a leg day the day before an upper body workout involving a decent amount of pulling have some risk of interference given neither systemic MRV nor local MRV exceeded? I would say my first guess would be no, but you got to try and figure out if that does for you. Some people get gnarly stimulus out of these exercises. I get almost dick out of them, so I could for sure do them and recover them just fine. But the question is, can you, James?
Yeah, and like you could feasibly like try to do that as like a pre-exhaust kind of thing for certain muscle groups, like on rowing type movements, I would imagine. Ultimately, though, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. Just trial and error and see how it goes.
Yeah. Daniel Hacker, Mr. Hacker, as he's known around these parts, says, can you talk about strict chest touching the bar overhand pull-ups versus regular chin over the bar overhand pull-ups? Is one better than the other? Would an individual best be suited, if they can, to focus on chest touching the bar instead of just chin peeking over like so most people do? Truthfully, I've never seen a moderate to heavyweight male, just let's say 190 pounds plus, do multiple sets of 10 to 15 reps of strict chest to bar pull-ups in my life. I've seen people strap weight on and pull just high enough to peak their chins or even head over the bar, but never full chest to bar. So my opinion on this is that chest to bar is better because it's a more full range of motion. It recruits more back musculature to do. It is way harder, but that doesn't mean it's better, but I think it's harder for the right reasons. Here's an interesting side note. I don't know, Daniel, if you ever heard me say this. I said it in other contexts. I don't know if I said it on the webinar. Franco Colombo, RIP, was asked if he had ever programmed weighted pull-ups for any of his clients, and he said no. And have you ever done weighted pull-ups? And he's like, not in any meaningful capacity. And they're like, how the fuck is that possible? Your back is fucking enormous, and you've trained a bunch of people with huge backs. And he goes, here's the deal. People don't know how to do real pull-ups. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I start people out doing regular pull-ups, just chin to the bar. When they can do multiple sets of 10 to 15 of those, I start them to touch their clavicles. When they can do multiple sets of 10 to 15 of those, I get them to touch their fucking sternums. Now, you give me a 200-pound male who can touch a sternum for sets of 10 on the pull-up, which, by the way, Franco Columbu was, you'll have lats hanging out of your fucking, like, balls. Like, you'll look like a goddamn cartoon character. So those kinds of pull-ups are so, so effective. The reason I almost never program them, and the reason that you never see anyone do them, because most people can't do them, and almost no pro bodybuilders can do them. You're not going to see people weigh 280 being able to do that shit. It's just not going to happen. So chin to bar is great because it standardizes the movement, but it standardizes a movement that if you really, really got people to do full ROM, most people just couldn't do. So if you can do, and you find no joint pain of doing the chest all the way to bar, I would do those because they're ballers. Fuck. I've done them in the past when my like tricep injury thing was healthier. I've done a set of 10 with my body weight, full chest to bar pull-ups, and it's a fucking baller back movement. If you can do them, I would do them. Whenever I see relatively jacked people that are light, being able to do pull-ups, and they've got like 90 pounds on the fucking in their belt, and they're doing like just peeking over chin stuff, my first thought is stop doing that shit. Save yourself a bunch of dick pain from the weights clipping your balls and do unweighted pull-ups, sets of 10 to 15, touching your clavicle or sternum or anywhere in between, and you will get just awesome back involvement. And by the way, the lower you go from clavicle to sternum, the more your lats are involved at the very bottom of their pulling. So it's almost like a pullover movement, which is super lat specific. So I would say that it turns less from a power lift into a real good bodybuilding lift if you go super low like that.
Yeah, it's really awesome. Like Mike said, the big limitation is that most people can't do them, or can't do them like enough to really get like sets out of it. I've entertained the thought of using like the chest to bar as like the ideal rep, and then kind of using the chin over the bar as like the minimum technical threshold for failure. And I haven't really come up with a good system on that. It's kind of wishy-washy. So the idea being like do as many chest to bars as you can, and the set basically is ending when X number of reps from fail that you can't even get your chin above the bar. The problem, so the benefit there is you can start getting better at chest to bars. Mm-hmm. The downside is your technique is inconsistent across all reps, which makes tracking and just monitoring your preparedness at any given set really difficult. So
yeah. It fucks your ego up too, because you're like, am I doing well or not? I can't tell.
And especially like if it was me, I would get like one chest to bar, and that would be it. And then I would maybe get like a few like sternum kind of like, it would just be like immediately start coming up. And
yeah,
at that point.
Actually, the answer of which one's better, chest to bar, if you can do multiple reps of them, or chin over bar, is actually answered by how would you do assisted pull-ups when you do assisted pull-ups. Mm-hmm. Anytime we do like a good assisted pull-up machine is one that lets you get super fucking high and really arch, and that gives you a pump in your lats that's just not comparable even to regular pull-ups in many cases. So if you have a really great assisted pull-up machine, there's your answer, man. That's how that shit works.
Absolutely.
All right. Daniel Hacker says, can we rehash the max amount of sets per exercise within a session recommendation? I was under the impression that it was 3 to 8 sets on average. However, I get the feeling that you both have backed off on that upper number. If that's the case, if so, why? I think that it's 3 to 8 sets is per exercise. I would say it's if you're saying max, forget max. Let's just do the range. I think the range is 2 to 6 is how I would characterize it. Once you do 6 sets of an exercise, unless it's some kind of trick like down sets, even then down sets, I don't know. 6 sets of straight squatting, even with down sets, seems excessive. At that point, the big problem on the bottom end is if you're not doing at least 2 sets of something, why the fuck are you doing it? Just two sets of something else. Secondly, on the top end, we've noticed, and a bunch of other people have as well, that the stimulus to fatigue ratio really starts to drop off. You start to get a mind-muscle connection deterioration after like 6 sets, where you're just sort of moving around and no one has any fucking idea what's going on. It seems to be like a repetitive, not boredom, but like a staleness, a short-term staleness that develops that prevents you from doing as much good as you think you can. In addition to that, there's an opportunity cost. After 6 sets of a specific movement, you've stimulated the specific fibers of that movement enough. And I think it's time to move on to other fibers. Every muscle has multiple angles you can hit. And after 6 sets of an angle, you could do another angle and get a much better use of your time. James?
Yeah, my opinion on this has changed a little bit more recently too, where I used to not feel so bad about just blasting one movement, especially if you were using heavy and light days and some fatigue management strategies built into there. Not a huge deal. I think for especially like intermediate males, it's that 2 to 6 is really the sweet spot, minus a few like kind of isolation movements where you might just suit you well. I think for females, you might be able to creep that up a little bit. But for the most part, it seems like if your goal is to get to 10 sets instead of doing, fucking like 8 sets of squats or 8 sets of one movement, it's probably in your best interest to maybe cap one off at 5 and then start filling out either earlier. Sorry, I said that wrong. It might be good to have 2 movements in there, whether you kind of try to fill one all the way up to 5 or 6 and then keep the other ones a little bit less. That's fine, but it seems to be a better strategy.
Yeah. Do you think having a minimum daily step, weekly average count during a mass is productive and useful? If so, any wager of what that might be? I like the weekly average better than I like the daily minimum because some days you're just not going to be able to hit it. Although a daily minimum goal is good, I would say daily minimum cutoff maybe is a bit much. I think any wager what that might be really depends on a bunch of other stuff, how active you are. You could be active in a context that doesn't involve stepping. But I think for most people, 3,000 steps to 5,000 steps minimum per day on amassing can just keep them super healthy and super lean and super awesome. 5,000 to 10,000 steps for me is like, you can be in there and that's fine for massing. You'll have to eat a lot more. Anytime someone is massing with 10,000 steps plus, it starts to be a little bit insane. Jared Feathers, leanest client of all time, and the quote leanest man in Asia, probably also the world, Starvin Marvin the Martian from Hong Kong. And if you guys want to follow him on Instagram, it's Marvin Physique, I think, on Instagram. A very, very awesome account. He had like striations in his face, and I'm not joking when I say he had striations in his face. He has a step count of something like 20,000 plus per day because he's completely hyperactive and just does this all the time. His NEAT is so through the roof. They did 0 cardio ever, and Jared kept him on like 300 to 500 grams of carbs for the majority of the diet because otherwise he would just fade away. And they would lower him to 200 grams of carbs every now and again, and he would lose like a kilo, and they'd be like, back. So, back up. Yeah, and he got so lean, it just didn't make any goddamn sense at all. So that is one of those, like if you were him, you would have to eat so many fucking calories to mass. It would just be damn near impossible. So I would say 3,000 to 5,000 is good for a mass for most people. Anything 5,000 is a bonus and get you more food and keep you leaner. And then anything 10,000 above, I would say is kind of like, Jesus Christ, what are you doing, James?
So I have more of like a critical point on Daniel's question here. So not to
love it. Tear him up.
Nah, he knows that it's all in good.
Yeah.
But really, so like the question of like, do you think like counting steps is productive and useful? Well, you could ask that about anything, right? Is anything worth measuring and monitoring? Well, it depends. Like, do you have a question that needs to be answered by collecting that data, right? It's only as useful and productive as what you do with it, right? So I would say, no, it's not, you shouldn't just have a step count for the sake of having a step count. I've never like used a step counter for anything outside of just curiosity. So in that regard, like you should have a question like, do I need to monitor my NEAT levels during mass? And is the step counter an easy way or like a productive way of doing so? Okay, well now you have something that you can work with, but like just doing it for its own sake, it's like, well, should I be monitoring my heart rate? Well, depends. Like, what do you want to know about your heart rate? Are you worried about cardiovascular disease? Are you worried about fitness? Are you worried about, who knows? So the measurements and like the monitoring are only as good as the questions that you need to be answered, right? So that's kind of the idea there.
That's a really good point, James. If I may jump off of that, I think we talked to a lot of folks who are very number-centric, and it's very good to be number-centric, but the numbers, as James said, have to be indicative of things and have to be utilizable. They have to be feeding into an analytical rubric that generates something. If you have a panel of things in your car that collect data, but the panel goes nowhere, like you're like, yeah, man, my car can tell me the wind speed. You're like, why do you want the wind speed? You're like, I don't know. Like, it's just, and so what I'm saying is it actually doesn't come at zero cost. A lot of people, massing means keeping a low cortisol environment, actually just being in training all the time, keeping as low cortisol as you can. it's very easy to fatigue yourself psychologically with a bunch of different stuff. Like some of my most annoying days when I have like 50 little tiny to-do points on my to-do list instead of just 2 or 3 big ones. So if on top of eating enough food, on top of training, on top of everything, you have to hit some fucking minimum numbers on your mass, you have to ask yourself, like, okay, is this so that I don't become a fat piece of shit like I tend to when I get to be a lazy cunt on mass? If that's the case, track away. But if you have no problems at all, fuck tracking. Get to tracking when you're cutting, when it really is a thing. Because remember, NEAT on cutting goes down, which is why a minimum is really good. But on massing, usually your NEAT goes up when you eat some carbs and you're like, oh, let's get funky. Like I always fantasize on my cuts about massing and just eating a bunch of rice and just sitting in front of the TV. And when I'm actually massing, I eat a bunch of rice and I'm like, let's go for a walk, honey. And my wife and I go for a walk. And I'm just like, what the fuck am I doing walking around? But I don't feel like sitting down. So make sure it's for a good reason before you track everything, because tracking stuff can make you fatigued from tracking stuff.
Totally.
Last question from Mr. Hacker. Why is it beneficial for combat sport athletes to include weighted carrying and variations in their S&C program? You've both mentioned a basic S&C plan for combat athletes should include a press, pull, squat variant, hinge variant, twist, and carry. I understand the utilities of the others, but not the carry. Hit me, pun intended.
I honestly don't remember recommending a carry. Maybe
I don't believe I have ever recommended a carry. But if a carry is recommended, it's not entirely unwarranted. You have to carry people in MMA because you have to pick them up and you have to carry them at least a couple steps and you have to put them or slam them down. In addition to that, being loaded vertically and expecting to be walking on your feet without falling. Imagine somebody pulls guard on you and they're hanging off of you. You have to be able to know how to walk around while carrying things. Otherwise, all the isometric or static strength in the world might not help you and you'll fall. If you're used to some kind of weighted carry, when that happens, it's not going to be a problem. Weighted carries also have a real good benefit for core strength that is tough to get out of basically anything else. If a guy can do a strongman, weighted carry with 600 pounds for a couple of steps, if he's picking a guy up, that guy's not going to take him down from above the feet. Like, it's just not going to happen. You're not going to twist someone. It's just, the guy's made of twisted steel. So carries are very, very functional. They can be justified in a plan. I don't think James and I ever said it has to have one of these things.
I think maybe we said you could use a carry in lieu of doing other forms of cardio or conditioning type stuff. Maybe I don't really remember though.
It might be somebody else.
If I did, then maybe I said it, and I would probably reevaluate my position on that. But I don't think I did.
All right. Tony Drotnell says, hey guys, just watched the Game Changers panel from India seminar. Couldn't help but break into a grin as soon as the presenter brought up the supposition that a vegan diet is better for the environment than an omnivorous diet. Sana immediately nudged Menno, and Mike and Mel traded glances of, do you want to take this one first? And Mike even did a premature victory dance in his seat. I don't think that's the victory dance. I think that's the Ronnie Coleman raise the roof dance. That's me excited for the upcoming slaughtering. The readers invited to speculate the nature of the celebratory gesture. But I was surprised that your responses were less devastating than I was expecting. Mike, why did you choose to go with a broader economic argument, improving wealth and technology lead to a cleaner environment, rather than addressing specific environmental impact of a vegan diet versus omnivorous diet? Even just in passing to mention that, let me guess, based on the totality of the literature, is by no means clear that the claim of vegan diet having less environmental impact than an omnivorous diet is in fact correct. Mel later alluded to a complete life cycle analysis of these diets being needed to draw meaningful conclusions, but I'm curious as to why you did not raise it for this point first. I didn't, because I actually think that the totality evidence shows that not eating any meat will reduce environmental pollution and degradation and carbon footprint by a really small amount. So instead of saying it's not a big deal, it's a small deal, is that tends to not be a very strong argument. Because then the retort is, well, it is a deal, so what's keeping you eating meat? If, you're going to piss in the earth a little bit, you might as well piss a lot. So I was, the reason I went with that broader argument, because the broader argument no longer talks about something eating meat, which is a little bit environmentally more degrading than eating vegan, which is a little less, tiny little bit less degrading, and introduces something that is going to save the environment, the planet, and the fucking solar system, which is economic development and technological innovation, and makes all of these moot fucking points. It's like talking to someone who is debating on whether outhouses are cleaner versus digging your own ditch and shitting in it. And we're just at the point in technological innovation where industrial centralized plumbing is coming into the equation. Like, fucking get plumbing because it's better than all this shit, I promise. So it was one of those where I knew I didn't have a long time to talk, and I had to get to the main point, which was all these things are rendered fucking moot. And the reason I brought this up is because people get really caught up in the minutia, and one of my big the guy I'm a huge fan of on the environmental science thing is a gentleman named Bjorn Lomborg, who runs a think tank called the Copenhagen Consensus Center. And he, one of the things he brings up is brilliant economic analysis, is that people really like to major in the minors. There's people banning straws, which is by itself fine. It's going to help the environment a little bit. Going vegan, which is a huge lifestyle change that helps the environment a tiny bit. But then when people are like, hey, what's your opinion on technology R&D and liberalization of economies to promote technological innovation and more freedom? They're like, yeah, I'm not so sure. And you're a fucking idiot. Get the fuck out of my face. It's like shopping for 2 hours at GNC and reading the backs of all the vitamin labels and eating a dog shit diet of fucking just white rice and nothing else. Like, don't even come to me with that shit. So I think it's important to, when you get the chance to speak on this stuff, to go right for the kill, so to speak, and talk about what really matters. And lastly, I was in India, which on the growth curve of pollution, so when a country gets richer, it pollutes more and more and more until it gets over the curve to where it can afford clean technologies, and then it goes over that curve. So like Sweden, the United States, Finland, all these countries are way over that curve. They passed the curve in the 1940s. The more technology they have, the more the industry is, the more GDP they produce, the cleaner the environments get. So the American rivers and lakes and everything, they just get cleaner every single year. Go to Sweden, it's the most technologically advanced country in the world, and try to find me some pollution. Like, it's really fucking hard. India is still on the ascension of that curve. So they have a decade at least to go where more industry will make them more polluted. I wanted to say something relevant to them and explain it so that they knew that, okay, it's not less industry, because India is real tempted to be like, well, let's ease up on the industry. Don't fucking do that. More industry until you can afford to buy cleaner shit, and then clean, and everything goes super well.
Fantastic. I had 3 points. I'm going to try to remember all of them. One, shout out to Jason Finan, Party King, awesome guy we met in Dublin, really, really smart guy. When we were hanging out with him, he was on this kick for a little while, and this is just an analysis he shared. It's not meant to be like overwhelming evidence for anything, but he was like, Ireland is really big on livestock, right? Like lamb, beef, stuff like that. And he was saying, like, everyone's all up in arms about the carbon footprint of like livestock, right? He's like, so I estimated how much like raising one cow is, and he gave me some numbers. I don't remember what they were. And he's like, then I estimated how much it takes for these blueberries grown in like South America to make their way in packaging all the way here to Ireland, right? And he's like, when you actually do the math of like having to farm, package, and then ship with multiple different logistics, it goes on like a plane, it goes on a boat, it goes on a truck, it goes all over these places. The carbon footprint actually ends up being very similar, not the same, but it's a lot more than people think, which I thought was really, really interesting when you start comparing like the vegan versus kind of omnivorous lifestyle. So it's not all cut and dry. Another thing is Mel's going to release her like super thorough critique of Game Changers very, very soon.
Cool.
And I think it's like 20 pages or some shit. She just like gave me like a ghastly look, like she's been overwhelmed working on this. It's like,
holy fuck, that's great. I can't wait.
It's like 20 pages. And I actually heard, I think it was on Sam Harris's podcast, he had some very Steven Pinker-esque person. It wasn't him, but it was somebody who studied a very similar line of research. And they also showed that like not only do technologies get cleaner as society becomes wealthier and more industrious, people are just more willing to part ways with their expendable money to make things less shitty, right? Before it's like, I need electricity or my food is going to rot and I'm going to die. Now it's like, okay, I have electricity and I have some money and I would rather not live near poo, right? That's it. So you get there. You get there.
Yeah.
It just takes a little while.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the India situation is really dire because India has a regulatory environment which is just kicking capitalism in the balls at every step. And they could be richer way faster. A very interesting thing that an economist named Tyler Cohen, who I'd highly suggest people look into because he's awesome, mentions anytime he gets the chance is even small growth rate differences make for incredible differences in the standards of living and cleanliness and all that stuff over time. I don't remember the date, but I think it was either something like the 1950s or the 1940s, if the United States growth rate was 1% less per year every year since I think the 1940s, but it might be even more recent, to now, the US current GDP would be the equivalent of Mexico. So holy fuck, is that a big difference? So we think, oh, we have some regulations, but like, no. The faster you can grow your economy, the sooner you arrive to first world. And, you know, Thailand, Turkey, these are countries that today have the same rough GDP per capita that the United States had in the 90s. And the average person there is starting to live like the person did in the 90s. And that's fucking incredible. Nobody in the 90s, Thailand, you'd have been like, that's a place where there's like dead shit in the road and no one goes. Like, yeah, that's it. And there's some hookers too. Like, it's unbelievable.
There's still hookers.
Yeah, that's right. It's more hookers, but what a great place. Colon, what a great place. You know, the deal is that anytime you stifle innovation and progress in a building of wealth, it doesn't maybe not look like much year to year. After 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, it's fucking night and day. And if you want every place in the world to look like Japan and Norway, that's actually fucking possible. It just takes time and good policy. If we don't have a good policy and we're worried about, you know, the global climate change ending the world tomorrow, it's just not going to do. And if we're worried about all being vegan instead of, you know, promoting other things that are much more impactful, then we can cast ourselves astray.
Well said.
Speaking of which, straight from exactly the middle of Japan, Sean Morokawa Rubin says, "Hey guys, I've been gone for a couple of months. Well, you've been missed. Today are all questions I've asked previously in my time being an RP Plus subscriber, but unfortunately didn't quite click the first time. I felt guilty about asking a second time and taking up time for other people's questions, but since I haven't asked anything in a while, I figure I won't feel as bad asking them again now. Haha. Hopefully they will click with me this time. If they don't, we're going to beat the fuck out of you, Sean. We're going to find you. James is going to kickbox. He's going to tee off right on you. It's going to be awful. We're going to world star that shit. All right.
World star.
Number, like, random sports scientist attacks one of his subscribers. Like, what?
We're posting the video on RP Plus to shame you.
Oh, cool. It could be like an exclusive where to see the video, you have to be an RP Plus. Number one, is there any credence to the idea that stabilizing your new set point / weight after a diet to reduce fat accumulation during the subsequent bulk? If, for example, you maintain for 3 weeks after a diet as opposed to going straight into bulking, might you have better nutrient partitioning towards lean mass? Maybe, but only because you gained fat during that maintenance phase. I'm not sure. I think probably a little bit, but I don't know of any convincing credence to that idea. If you know, I think that there could be a lot of fatigue you're carrying from training and dieting that a 3-week maintenance can reduce. As far as the set point, settling point stuff, some of the post-dietary hormones and stuff could come back a little more in line, but as long as you're still as lean, most of them still suck. So you actually maybe even better just going straight into a bulk and getting into putting on the fat necessary to set you straight again. So I'm not positive on that, James.
I'm not sure either. I was going to go kind of a similar direction where it might be the case that like you might just be subsequent to just more rapid weight regain, which might not be the best. So there might be some credence in doing that maintenance phase in between. I don't really know though. I'm really not sure. I can't give you a straight answer on that one, buddy. Sorry.
Number two, we know that the first set of an exercise gives you the most fitness accrual and subsequent sets of diminishing returns. You guys mentioned in an old question that SFR may actually increase across sets, however, due to better mind-muscle connection, pump, and technique. But if fatigue rises linearly across sets and fitness drops linearly across sets, fatigue might actually rise faster than linearly. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't returns still be diminishing regardless of the mentioned factors? They absolutely would. They absolutely would. But the thing is that we have to expand our view a little bit. Not only does the first set of an exercise give you the most fitness accrual and all subsequent sets have diminishing returns, the first session in a week gives you the best fitness returns and all the other sessions for that muscle gives you less. So if you're asking a question, so you could say, okay, I'm going to do one set 5 times a week. Okay, cool. But then you could say I'm going to do 5 sets once a week. Okay. It's not immediately apparent on theory alone in that regard of SFR, which one of those is better. Because yes, it is true that set to set, your net yield goes down. Absolutely. And your stimulus to fatigue ratio certainly goes down, absolutely. But it also goes down through the week. So it's not clear what's the best solution there whatsoever. And because mind-muscle connection and stuff improves, because the pump gets better, because technique improves set to set to set, you might actually have a little bit of less of a reduction from set to set to set than you would expect, and that might not carry for super high frequency training. So I think somewhere between there, instead of training 7 days per week with one set, you might be better off training twice a week with 3 to 4 sets and so on and so forth, because there might be a middle ground there that, yes, things get worse set to set to set, but those mitigating factors might make them a little less worse than they would in a way that doesn't really happen if you spread all that out through the week. James?
Yeah, and I think what's maybe worth noting too is the fatigue that you get across sets might not actually be linear. It might be more of like an exponential where it's like, and it really starts to, or actually, sorry, the other direction actually goes up, right? And so I was thinking more of SFR. And so in that case, really what we're trying to do is get the dose response within a session, and Mike already expanded it out to like weekly stuff, but within the session, right, you're trying to basically get as much accumulated high quality work before that rapid takeoff in that exponential curve, right? So the first few, however many, who knows, maybe like 6 to 10, something like that, are going to be fairly linear, but then it's going to probably take off at some point. And that point, SFR really starts to tank. And that's the kind of the point where you really are probably going to stop doing any extra work, because at that point, you're just accumulating a lot of fatigue, not accumulating a lot I
don't think it's productive to see the SFR as completely. So I don't think it's productive to see the SFR as actually getting lower set to set to set, but those factors may mitigate the drop of the SFR more than normally would. Also, phrasing it like this, and I've seen it phrased like this before, the first set of an exercise gives you the most fitness or curl, and subsequent sets have diminishing returns. That's true, but it's still returns that if you don't do subsequent sets, you just won't get. Just because things get harder to get doesn't mean they're still not on the net balance a good idea. So.
Diminishing returns kind of, you forget that it's just less positive. It doesn't mean negative. It just means like you're getting slightly less positive, but you still need to accrue large amount of fitness. You do that by summating sets.
Yeah, it's like you're doing a relatively easy job and someone pays you $500 for the first hour, $250 for the next hour, and $125 for the hour after that. Like, are you going to leave after the second hour? Because you're like, fuck, $125 an hour, I don't work for that. Like, I'm pretty sure you'd stay, right? You'd probably stay until you got really tired or he was charging you to work, probably a good idea. So.
Yeah.
Number 3, if someone is using higher rep ranges to target slower twitch fibers, but only rest long enough between sets to get their faster twitch effective reps on subsequent sets, wouldn't defeat the purpose of doing higher rep sets in the first place? Maybe. I think if you're doing sets of 30 to intentionally hit your slower twitch fibers, you'd want to rest long enough to still get relatively high reps on subsequent sets. Yes, possibly, but here's the thing. When you rest very short times, your faster twitch fibers, and you do only effective reps, let's say sets of 5. Unfortunately, because of a high acidotic environment, your faster fibers usually just poop right the fuck out or don't even bother contracting. Fatigue grossly over-affects your faster twitch fibers. So this is one of the big, unfortunately, downsides of the effective reps concepts and why it's limited, is that the last 5 reps, not of every set, are super dominantly fast twitch. They're more fast twitch than you would think, but if you do 5 and 5 and 5 and 5 and take 10 seconds between, at the 3rd or 4th set, it's mostly slower twitch anyway at that point, and your fucking faster twitch fibers are just giving you a giant middle finger. So either way, it accomplishes the same purpose. You might have to do more sets that way. If you rested longer, you would do, fewer sets. But then again, if you rest longer, you give your faster twitch fibers some time to recover, then you might actually get more faster twitch activity on average in a set of 30 because they're sort of beefed back up, and during some of that time they help and then they poop out. If you do back-to-back sets of 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, they may just be off the entire fucking time because they're like, what, fuck this. They literally no excitation, contraction, coupling, and then it's almost exclusively slower twitch. And if that's the case, we don't know if this is exactly the case, but we have enough doubt to say we don't actually know which one of these methods trains these slower twitch fibers the best. You would have to put in a lot of volume to train the slower twitch fibers, which they probably get with multiple back-to-back sets. But put it this way, as far as time, what's faster, straight sets of 30 or back-to-back sets of 5? Well, I don't know, if you're in the gym for 8 minutes, what do you get more reps of or more stimulus? It's probably a wash, and even still the back-to-back sets of 5 probably still faster because you rest less long. So I would say it's definitely up in the air. I love the logic here, but unfortunately, the effective reps thing doesn't hold up for multiple fatiguing sets, because at that point, towards the end of those sets, you're not using maximum fast twitch or exclusively fast twitch. That's almost certainly false.
And that's to say nothing of, like, if we use myoreps as an example, that's to say nothing of like the crippling psychological fatigue and physical pain
100%.
And misery of
if you
that.
can push that, yeah. And if you can't push through that stuff, then it's almost all slow twitch activity, because you never even bother recruiting your faster twitch fibers, because your body's like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, that's a truly miserable way to train. As if training wasn't miserable enough at times. This is like a particularly like just sadistic way to do it.
Yeah, I don't want to. We're working really, really fast on this book, and I'm actually going to be sitting down this week and next week to make the figures. So we're getting wrapped up on the book, but the book has a very good discussion about effective reps, sort of upside. It's not its own section; it just comes up various points, upsides, downsides. The effective rep concept is a useful concept. It goes far, but not nearly to explain all of the variation in training. All the other reps are effective too; they're just less so. And if you're with really high reps, the last 5 reps in a 30 rep set do not hypertrophy your faster twitch fibers nearly as much as a set of 5 to failure with heavy weight. It's absolutely not the case. They don't recruit as much. It's not as much tension throughput for a bunch of different reasons, neural, pain, and if you somehow circumvent all those, which you can, the acidosis shuts down faster twitch fibers, and the slow twitch fibers can actually continue to crank through acidosis, believe it or not. So, and hilariously, the faster twitch fibers produce more acid, so they have their own bomb. They eat their own explosive and blow up. So it's an interesting on paper hypothesis that does not. It's great because it really does tell you, like, hey, if you go close to failure, there's a lot of good stuff there. If you go really far away from failure, man, you're probably not doing yourself any favors. But outside of that, it's got some real serious limitations. Yeah.
Well, the good news is that more effective sets also include more effective reps, so it's a good way of checking both boxes.
Yeah, that's why the sets really do win that in the battle. And I said some folks for a while, I'm sure some people are still doing it, started counting only the number of effective reps, and that's not going to get you anywhere very far, unfortunately.
Yeah.
All right, should we do the 3 YouTube questions and then sign off?
Yes, please.
Okie doke. I am going to share my screen. Boom. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
This is a good one. Barshaben says, do light sessions during a deload also serve the purpose of re-stimulating protein synthesis? I don't know what re-stimulating is. It means exactly. Is it resensitizing?
I think he's maybe leaning towards resensitizing.
I don't know. I don't think so, but they do keep your fitness elevated so that your return to training is more smooth and gives you better overall results.
I think if we're going with the idea of resensitizing, I think we can like give a light yes, in the sense like it's not as powerful as taking like 2 weeks of active rest, but a deload is enough to, like, if your MEVs have climbed up really, really high and it's getting difficult to get good training, the deload can help bring it back down to manageable levels. So in that regard, yes, but it's just not as powerful at resensitizing as doing maintenance volume training or, active rest type stuff tends to be.
Yeah. Brett Contreras, so Nicholas Luca Ricciardi says,
spicy one.
Brett Contreras has stated that the chin-up is one of the best exercises for abs due to its anti-extension nature.
Sorry, I was reading Natty Fatty Powerlifting because I saw my name came up.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was reading the other one. Okay. The best for abs.
Yeah. However, when using extra weight on chin-ups via dip belt, it didn't increase rectus abdominis activity. It lowered it. Do you think a weighted vest would work better? How else can we overload the chin-ups without it lowering abs? So I don't think any. Yeah.
What is the question here?
I think when people do chin, well, let's see.
He's saying Brett says that chin-ups are good for abs, and then the question is, how would we overload the chin-ups without lowering the abs? Like, Does you mean without like stimulating the abs?
Without lowering without lowering the activation of the abs. The thing is, I think James and I would say that we don't do chin-ups for abs.
Yeah,
it's not.
Sorry.
Yeah, maybe Brett was saying that the chin-up is a good exercise for abs. That's great, like in addition, but I don't think Brett would do the chin up to target the abs. I think people try to hold their legs in front of them or hold the legs erect, and that's why the chin up worked for the abs. But I think that you just use an ab exercise for the love of God. And the thing is, ab exercises are so easy to set up. You know, almost every gym has a slant board. Just go on a slant board, grab a weight, and fucking do some crunches. I wouldn't try to bastardize chin ups into something that also trains the abs. If I was going to do that, what I would tell you to do is put weight between your knees and lift your knees up to your chest and then do pull-ups, and that's going to get you a real great ab workout. But then again, I don't know what the fuck you're doing pull-ups for. I would do pull-ups for the back and leave it at that.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like a nice side benefit. Like, oh, you get a little indirect ab work, which might be contributing towards a maintenance volume for your abs. So you don't actually have to train abs to maintain them, but train abs if you want abs.
Yeah. Let's answer. You want a fun question or a serious question?
Let's do a fun one. We had enough serious ones today.
LK says Jason Blaha. Jason Blaha says who's been nothing but nice to me. I will say. Jason Blaha says you need a 100 weighted pull up, 200 overhead press, 300 bench, 400 squat, and 500 deadlift to look jacked. Jason Blaha has met his own standards. And he has for decades. Is he an outlier or is he doing something wrong? Is there a better approach you suggest for his viewers as his guidelines hasn't worked well for him? No disrespect, serious question. We got 7 replies.
I like how he says it's a serious question and we picked it as the silly question.
Yeah, that is funny. That is unfortunate. I didn't see that part before
No, it's good. You know, I think it's like, that's one of those, like, I'd say if you were to take a population average of people and you say, okay, if of these people who can meet this criteria, they would probably look pretty jacked. Can you look jacked without doing all that stuff? Sure. Right?
If you have really good strength genetics, Ed Cohen could do all of that in his sleep at 50 pounds less muscle mass than he currently has as like an old man. Yeah. He looked like he ever trained and he could do that. If you're gifted for strength, then you can look like not much and do all that shit. If you're like Nigerian ancestry or West African ancestry, you might be able to do none of that, and you look like a pro bodybuilder just for no goddamn good reason, or like pro physique athlete. So I would say, like James is saying, these are the average population that respond best. Something that actually somebody said, Nicholas Vassallo, again, I cut him slack. He said, you're saying he's jacked because I would say it's simply a matter of his body fat and loose skin covering his definition of muscle mass. That's a great point. If you are lean and you can do these things, you're going to look movie star jacked for sure. Like, this is like the Jason Statham standard, like for sure. But if you're not lean and you can do all these things, the 100 weighted pull-up, I'd like to see how the fuck anyone did that. Like, not that I'm saying no one can do that. I would like to see what people mean when they say that technical-wise.
Skeptical on that.
For our earlier conversation. But if you could do this, and you're lean, unless you're really tall, you're going to look pretty fucking jacked. And again, if you're really tall, you may be able to do all these things and still look sort of not very jacked. You could weigh 250 and be 6'8" and
and like another thing, and I've never heard Jason say this, or I don't know what the context is necessarily, but a lot of people will just make up arbitrary stuff like this because it's something that they can do, and it kind of reaffirms themselves. I don't know if that's what he did, and I'm not accusing him of that, but a lot of times people will say, like, in order to do X, Y, Z, you need to do this feat that I did, which is like I find to be really impressive, right? So it's like a ego, like, reaffirming type of thing, but it's arbitrary, like.
Yeah, I will tell you guys, here's the real simple solution, and James and I have mentioned this a couple times as we were so much stand behind this. You want to know how much strength it's going to take you to get jacked? Keep getting stronger and wait till you're jacked. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you could get a certain level of strength and not be jacked, or you could get to a certain level of strength you don't think is impressive and be jacked. Some people just have great genetics for muscle shape. Jared Feather's quads just, for lack of a better term, feather out. And Jared Feather does not, like, when we have leg days, Charlie and I blow him out of the water, and then he fucking pulls his pants down, and we get to sucking his dick quick because his fucking legs are huge. I don't know why I said that. As soon as I said pulls his pants down, I was like, might as well sort of blow.
Just might as well go there.
But Jared Feather's quads are fucking ridiculous, and so I told Jared, like currently, like, he's doing like sumo stance squats because they really fit his frame really well. He's doing like low 300s for sets of roughly 10. I said, Jared, if you could do the low 400s for sets of 10 with your genetics, your quads are going to be pro-sized. Like, who the fuck else could you ever tell that sets of 10 and for 400 is going to get pro quality quads? I could do that 10 years ago. I never had pro quality quads back then. Are you kidding me? Because I'm really well leveraged to squat, and I can squat a lot without looking the part. Hilariously, if you're poorly leveraged for something, is when you can lift that whatever amount of weight someone says, you're going to look way, way better doing it. 500-pound deadlift. Look up, there's this guy on YouTube, Max Tuning or whatever. I think that's his name. He pulls like 600, right? And he weighs like 165 or some shit like that. You put a T-shirt on that kid. I don't know if he's gotten more jacked recently. 2 years ago, you put a T-shirt on that kid, and it'll look like he fucking pencil neck, right? And he fucking jacked underneath his clothes, but he's not jacked. But he's really well built to deadlift. Right? Like, so he's 600 pounds. You would think like Max Tuning could have been like when he was like 14, you'd be like, man, as soon as I deadlift 600, I'm going to be huge. Pull 600 2 years later, and it's like, God damn it. I guess I'm just going to be an amazing deadlifter, which is sweet as far as it goes.
Yeah. And like kind of just going back to your previous point, like the goal is not necessarily to squat over 400 pounds for, hypertrophy reps. It's to have pro level quads. And then the squatting that much weight is just a product of having pro level quads. It's not the goal that you're necessarily pursuing. You just want to have big ass quads. And as you said earlier, like just grow your quads and the strength will become evident later on. You don't have to do anything. It's just there.
It's really interesting. A lot of bodybuilders at a higher level, the way they analyze their training is really interesting because they'll say, I'm getting bigger this off season. I'm finally using the 120s for incline, which is new for me. And it's like, isn't it the other way around? Like, no, not really. No, it's not. Like, their chest got so big, they earned the 120s for quality reps. They're actually thinking about it the right way. Now, should you try to have a goal of inclining the 120s? You could switch your thing to sets of 5s, lower volumes, get a ton of neural strength. You could be inclining the 120s for 10s and not look like a bodybuilder. So train with higher volumes, train appropriately. Your strength will naturally go up over time and come with all that size. If you focus too much on strength, not as a metric, but as a goal, you can start to alter your training to get that strong. And then all of a sudden you're that strong, but nobody's cheering.
Really, really good. So I think on that note, we're going to wrap up this week's. Folks, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate they had some great RP Plus questions, and we had some actually ended up being pretty good YouTube questions as well. So well done to everybody involved. Keep sending them in. We appreciate it very much. Natty Fatty Powerlifting, I liked the shout out. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. And we'll talk to you guys next time.
Peace, homies.